Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider postgame show. Zach Ewing with Reed Darcey here to take you through a recap of LSU's victory over Arkansas tonight up in Fayetteville. And Reed, man, it seemed like for the first time all year, things went almost exactly according to LSU's script in this one. This is how they drew it up.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of, I think, probably two complete games they've played all year. I mean, I guess you can throw Ole Miss into that bucket. But yeah, it was a complete performance. It was a quick, easy, methodical win. Usually these games are super close. The last 4 years, each game has been decided by exactly 3 points, but that was not the case tonight. LSU won clearly. They won big. They won in a blowout, and it really was never really that close. It felt like they had control of the game throughout the entire thing. So if you're an LSU fan, I think you have to be encouraged by what you saw tonight. The defense, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, Zach, the defense was incredible. The best I've seen them play in a long time.
Yeah, 100%. We can roll right into that. Want to let you know that the LSU Sports Insider postgame coverage is brought to you by Waste Pro, and what we're going to do is be with you for the next 45 minutes or so. Koki Riley might pop in after writing his story here in a few minutes too, and we will take your comments live, your questions, show them on the screen as long as you keep it clean. That's all we ask. And we want you to be a part of the show. So go ahead and do that. LSU 34, Arkansas 10. Tigers win their 6th straight, led by the defense, as you said, Reed. And let's jump right into that. I mean, LSU forced 3 turnovers. Arkansas had 277 yards. I think they had 38 rushing yards might be the right number there at the end. And this is like, if you're the rest of the SEC, you've got to look at this as you let LSU get away with a few things early in the season, and now all of a sudden they're rolling and they look like a dangerous team.
It was about the pressure, and it was about the run defense. There are 2 keys to this game, I thought, was, okay, can you pressure Taylon Green, and can you stop Arkansas's rushing attack? If you do 2 of those things, you really have a great shot of winning the game. We knew that Arkansas going into the game, we knew they haven't done a great job of protecting Taylon Green. And so we thought that if LSU could use their pass rushers to really tee off on him, then Arkansas could have a rough night offensively. And that issue would only get compounded if Arkansas couldn't run the ball, because that's really the identity of their offense. It's using the rushing attack to really set up passes, play action passes, bootlegs in the passing game. And you saw Arkansas go to that early on, like on their very first drive. They're doing a good job getting Green outside the pocket, giving them some easy throws. But after that, once LSU stopped the run, they really couldn't do much of that because he was under duress all night.
Yeah, just a really good performance by that front 7. And I think if LSU's defense is going to round into form, they're a force to be reckoned with, Reed. And maybe we should go there next. I know Texas is playing Georgia right now in just a wild game in Austin. I don't know how many.
8
LSU
points. 23-15.
Early fourth quarter. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But as of this moment, LSU is in second place in the SEC at 3-0, behind Texas A&M, which is 4-0, and then you've got Texas sitting at 2-0, trying to also get to 3-0, and they're losing right now. We'll see what happens, but they were down 23-0 at halftime, and it's now 23-15. So kind of a reverse for Georgia as what happened in that Alabama game. So we'll keep an eye on that one, but it could very well be, in fact, it looks like it will be at this point, next week in College Station, the last 2 unbeaten teams in SEC play.
Yeah, Texas, but before tonight, Texas was one of 3 teams alongside A&M and LSU that were unbeaten in SEC play. And now, I guess if this result holds, Georgia's it looks like they're in the red zone now. If Georgia pulls off this game, then the only 2 undefeated teams left in the SEC are going to be LSU and Texas A&M. And I'm not sure if you had told me that before the season, that by the time we get to November, that these teams would be the only 2 left as undefeated in SEC play. I probably would have been shocked by that, but then when you start to think about the strength of schedule and all that kind of thing, then maybe I could see it. But again, that sets up LSU for a huge game on the road going into their bye week and then the Alabama game.
Yeah. I mean, again, we'll see what happens in the last 14 minutes here, but barring a turnover, it looks like Georgia is going to go back up by 2 scores here. In fact, they might be scoring right now, down at the 1 yard line. Okay, So not to give you a play-by-play of that, you can turn it on your TV. But yeah, next Saturday is October 26th, and assuming this Texas result holds, LSU and A&M will be the last two unbeaten SEC teams, which means the winner of that game will be the only unbeaten SEC team going into the month of November. And it's crazy. We talk about this all week long on the LSU Insider podcast later this week. But this game now in College Station may be bigger than the following week at Alabama, because the other result today in the SEC is Alabama losing to Tennessee.
Whoever wins between LSU and A&M gets into the driver's seat to get into the SEC championship game, and think about that. Sure. If you get in the SEC championship game, whether you win or lose, you're probably a playoff team. Now, if you win, you're going to be a top 4 seed because you won the SEC. You're probably going to be the first or second seed. But if you lose, I'd still say you're probably in the playoff. I heard you guys talk on the podcast earlier this week about, could the second place finish team in the SEC, could they be left out of the playoff? I don't think so. I think they'll get one of the at-large spots. No matter what happens, no matter what their record ends up being, I just think that the second place team in the SEC is going to have too good of a resume not to put them in.
Yeah, Adam says Whit Weeks is a beast. We got to talk more about Whit. He had his second tremendous game in a row. And we do need to talk more about the actual LSU Arkansas result and not just the context, but the context is exciting if you're an LSU fan, because I would say if you can win in College Station now, not only are the Tigers in the driver's seat going into the SEC title game, but given the way their schedule closes after the Alabama game, like you'd have to say that they'd be an odds-on favorite to get to Atlanta, because they could even lose the Alabama game still get in at 7-1.
Yeah, after Alabama, it's Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. And LSU is going to be favored in all 3 of those games. And you really like
maybe by double digits. Yeah.
Yeah. You really like
favorites.
You really like their chances, absolutely, like clearly, to beat Florida and Oklahoma. Oklahoma looked awful today. And Vanderbilt, again, if you told me before the season that Vanderbilt might be the toughest game out of those 3, I would have thought you were crazy. But it's looking out. That's what it's shaping up to be. It's been a wild season.
We talk and talk and talk throughout July and August about the season and what we think and what we expect. Yeah. And we want y'all to listen. But it turns out that not a lot of people can predict college football. It's crazy. So let's zoom into this one, Reed. I thought LSU played a great first half, except for red zone offense. That was the only part they were lacking. They settled for 3 field goals. They were up 16-7 at halftime. But it was really, they were up 13-0 at one point in this game. And it was the sort of start they have not had outside of South Alabama all year long. And we've been talking about it, how much easier things could get for this team if they can get out to a lead. And we saw that tonight.
Yeah, and I think Wilson pointed this out. I think it was the 3rd time this season that LSU has been leading at halftime. That's not a lot. It feels like it should have been more, but that's really not. That's an indication of how LSU has struggled to start these games. They struggled against USC. They struggled against South Carolina. They weren't leading in the first half against Ole Miss, but this time they were. They were up 16-7 at the end of the first half. And you really thought that they probably could have had a bigger lead, especially like you mentioned, given the red zone struggles and given all the pre-snap penalties they committed. That was really weird how those kept cropping up, really uncharacteristic by LSU. I'm sure Brian Kelly's going to be asked about those after the game, and I'm sure he's going to have some comments on it. But those penalties were a little concerning. They derailed a couple of drives. They forced LSU to attempt some field goals instead of getting into the end zone. So hopefully LSU can get them cleaned up next week, because if you think about it, that's probably not something you want to do on the road against A&M, a better A&M team, a more dangerous A&M team.
And we could talk this week about that too, but we have the backdrop of EA Sports changing its toughest place to play in their college football game from Kyle Field to Tiger Stadium. So the A&M fans probably will want to make a little bit of an atmosphere for that one. I'm sure Kyle Field will be quite literally rocking and rolling for that game. So LSU gets out to this lead tonight, 13-0. Caden Durham with the first of 3 touchdowns to open the scoring, and then LSU kind of just adds field goals throughout the half. They're up 16-7 at the half. Okay, second half, Arkansas gets the ball first. They come down and get a field goal, and then they stop LSU. So if you're a Razorback fan, all you want to do at halftime, we need points and we need a stop, and then we're right back in this thing. They got exactly what they wanted. Okay, LSU did pin them back inside the 10, but you had the ball back down one possession, and then Whit Weeks makes the play of the game. He tips the ball up and then catches it off of another deflection and almost returned it for a touchdown. He almost had the trifecta, the pass deflection, the interception, and the touchdown. He's down at the 1 yard line, but Durham scores a couple plays after that. And just like that, LSU's back in control. That they went for 2. They ended up 24-10, and Arkansas never threatened again.
That was the play that changed everything. It really changed the momentum of the game. It changed the trajectory of the game. I mean, it was crazy. The whole game turned on that one play. Arkansas was still in it at that point, and with a scoring drive, they could have really made things interesting going into the back half of the third quarter and then in the fourth quarter. But Whit Weeks, single-handedly, he made that play and he turned the game. So a week after he just absolutely dominated against Ole Miss, he had 18 tackles and a sack and another tackle for loss. He changed the game tonight, and he was awesome. And then, so after he made that interception off the deflection, the next Arkansas drive, he was spying Taylon Green, and he flew in on the sack once he escaped the pocket, dropped him for a 10-yard loss, and Arkansas punted. So that was back-to-back drives. Weeks ended both of them. He's been awesome the last 2-3 weeks. He's done a wonderful job filling in for Harold Perkins, and he's really turning into a star. I think he's a fan favorite as well. The LSU fans love watching him play. They love the energy he plays with. He's also one of the best guys to talk to on the team. He's one of the best quotes on the team as well. So the last 3 weeks have been really crucial for him in terms of turning into a star. I think now he's starting to become a household name, and I think LSU's defense has been very, very much helped by how good he's been the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, he plays with such enthusiasm, and that's what you hear about him too. It's just that's the type of person he is, and that comes through. And to have a guy like that leading your defense, especially as you say, without Harold Perkins in there, I mean, it has been such a bonus for LSU. So yeah, I mean, Arkansas never really threatened after that. And speaking of touchdowns to take to score leads, Georgia just got one on 4th and goal. So they went for it on 4th and goal from inside the 1 and scored. And they're now up 2 touchdowns. I think 30-15 on Texas with like 12 minutes to play in that game. So the Texas looks like they're going to get a loss.
Sorry, my dog wants to
football's crazy. Did I hear him earlier?
Yeah. My dog wants to make a point. She watched the game. She wants
star
to
the show.
Fire
off speaking of dogs, Caden Durham, 3 touchdowns, 101 yards. It's hard to believe that this guy's a freshman. Weren't talking about him preseason. He's kind of turned into LSU's bell cow. He took the ball 21 times tonight and got tough yards, made some big plays, and got in the end zone 3 times.
And that's another thing we should talk about too. We should talk about LSU's run game and how efficient it was, and how LSU could really lean on the run game, and they could trust it, and they could use it as a real efficient source of offense tonight. It was really good. I mean, LSU has struggled to run the ball all season, starting in the season opener against USC. We've seen them sort of, show some signs of life, figure some things out like they did in the second half of South Carolina, but it hasn't really been consistent. LSU hasn't been able to figure it out for one game and then stack it up with another good performance the next week, right? LSU, its offense, it did enough against Ole Miss, but its run game didn't help it at all. And so I think this week the run game was really good. The LSU could lean on it throughout the entire game, not just at certain moments, and it really turned into an efficient game that LSU controlled the pace of because they ran the ball so well. And that starts with Caden Durham, especially on that first touchdown. I believe it was from 22 yards out, a 2nd and goal from the 22, and then he just ran it in, broke a couple tackles, got in. That's what he does. That's the explosiveness that he gives the LSU offense. He's been a big boost.
Yep. You are watching the LSU Sports Insider postgame show, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate. It's brought to you by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. I'd like to ask you, if you're enjoying the show, hit the like button on YouTube. Subscribe to our LSU Sports at NOLA.com YouTube channel. And you can also leave your comments and questions. We'll show them live here on the show. Let's turn the dial back just a second, Reed. What negatives did you see from LSU tonight? It's easy after a game like this to say, oh, they've solved everything and they're going to go forward. Anything you look at tonight and say, that still is a red flag for me.
The penalties for sure. I think in the first half, I know they had, I believe, 7 false starts and 1 illegal snap. That's a lot. That's way too many. You can't repeat that next week against a better team. And then in the second half, they added to that. I believe on their first drive, the second half, Kyron Lacy had a pass interference and Emory Jones had a holding call. They really backed up LSU, completely derailed one of its drives. So I think, going into next week, you want to see LSU clean up the penalties because it's going to have a smaller margin for error against a team like Texas A&M. That was really what stuck out to me. The LSU was able to overcome it based on its defense, but it can't count on that week in and week out, committing so many penalties. But like I said, it was really uncharacteristic of them. I'm not sure what exactly went wrong there. I'm curious to see what Brian Kelly says after the game. But again, that was the only really concerning thing that LSU fans can leave this game with. The other thing I want to point out, I think Greg Penn, he got injured in the second half today. I don't think we saw him after that. If he is forced to miss any kind of time, that could be a concern as well. LSU's pretty thin at linebacker without Harold Perkins. I saw West Weeks out there today, but he's got sort of a nagging ankle injury. That's another thing we should keep an eye on. LSU's linebacker depth, Greg Penn's status. It didn't seem like he was hurt too seriously, or if it's an injury that's going to keep him out for some time. But if it does, then that can be kind of dicey for LSU.
Yeah, and CJ Daniels came back tonight, and then he took a big hit late. It looked like maybe he just kind of got surprised by that hit and wind knocked out of him more than anything. But he was good tonight. 7 catches for 86 yards. You mentioned the penalties. LSU had 11 of them for 80 yards. We're nitpicking a little bit here. Garrett Nussmeier, 23 of 34, 233 yards. LSU had to work for its passing offense tonight. The downfield passing game wasn't necessarily there. But that's, look, you got to credit the other team sometimes too. Arkansas has been a pretty good defensive team. Outside of the 129-yarder to CJ Daniels, he almost made another just absolutely spectacular catch of the decade catch in the second half. Just couldn't quite come up with it. It was like one-handed behind his neck sort of thing as he falls. I mean, it was incredible effort. It didn't get it. But other than that, their downfield passing game was a little bit muted tonight. But again, we've talked about all year how they need to run the ball and let that set up the pass. And they were able to run the ball 37 times tonight. Some of that's game state. You have the lead. And again, nothing explosive outside of the 1 touchdown run, but just I'd have to go look at success rate numbers. I would think if their EPA per play numbers, your explosiveness numbers weren't crazy high tonight. The success rate, which is more of your efficiency and staying ahead of the sticks and picking up first downs, that was very good tonight.
That's a great word to use, efficient. The whole offense was efficient tonight. The run game, the pass game, we didn't see the big, long, explosive plays. We didn't see too many of those. But everything else was super efficient. 4 or 5 yards at a time. You complete a pass, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards. CJ Daniels was big on that. He did a great job getting open underneath, giving Garrett Nussmeier throwing windows on shorter passes that picked up first downs. He burned Arkansas deep a couple times, like you mentioned on the catch. He almost came down on the sideline where he leaned back. There was also another play early on in the first half, I think, maybe on LSU's first drive, where he got behind an Arkansas cornerback and got a step on him, and Garrett Nussmeier threw him open, and he forced a pass interference call that set up LSU in the red zone. So he was really good. I mean, you hope he's all right. You hope he didn't suffer a more serious injury that's going to keep him out longer, because he came back tonight. He was great. He played his best game in an LSU uniform so far, and LSU is going to need all it can get from its receivers going forward.
Yeah. I am looking to see if there's any updates from CJ Daniels from the postgame, and I don't see anything yet, other than a lot of people angry saying that was a cheap shot. And that was borderline for me. It was kind of in the run of play, but probably more aggressive than it needed to be. So hopefully CJ Daniels is okay. Tell you what, let's take a break. And when we come back, we can look through some SEC scores. We'll continue to look at the LSU stats and give you our thoughts on those, but we do owe you a break. We'll be back on the LSU Sports Insider postgame show in 30 seconds.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider post-game show brought to you by The Advocate. I'm Zach Ewing. Reed Darcey is one of our Advocate LSU beat writers. He's joining us live after LSU beats Arkansas 34-10. You can leave your comments and questions live. We'll show them on the screen. And whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, that function should work. We'll see the comments, and as long as they're clean, we'll show them on the screen. You were talking about LSU's efficient offense. They were 8 of 15 on third down, 0 of 1 on fourth down. But, the very, very last drive, you throw that out. They were 0 of 1 on both third and fourth down on that drive when Ricky Collins was in at quarterback. So you throw that out there, 8 of 14 on third down in this game. That's what you're talking about. I mean, Sam Pittman said it on the broadcast. Like, we just can't get them off the field. And that was the story all night. LSU sucked up almost 38 minutes of possession. Didn't have to do a ton on offense because they were just – it was like big brother keeping little brother from touching him with this outstretched arm.
Yeah, the efficiency on third down helped them overcome some of those penalties in the first half, right? They would get behind the chains, and then they would convert the third down anyway. It didn't work all the time. They didn't convert every third down after a couple penalties derailed the drive, but they did enough times to really set themselves up in field goal position, I think. So for Damian Ramos to hit his field goals. We should shout out Damian Ramos real quick. All 4 for 4 on field goals. He had one from 47, one from 48 yards, I think, and the other 2 were from 33. So he was really important tonight. He was really good. And I think I want to read a couple tweets for you here, Zach. Scott Radley pointed this out. He says it's the fewest points that LSU has allowed in an SEC game since it went to Arkansas 2 years ago and won 13-10. If you remember that,
in a freezing rain game, yeah,
yes. Yeah, that game was freezing cold. Harold Perkins had the flu, but he came through, had a huge game anyway. So that was that game. Like I said earlier, one of the best defensive games I've seen LSU play in a long time. That's evidence of that right there. And then Brian Kelly had a quote after the game. He said, maybe next year they'll think about not making us homecoming anymore. So a little jab at Arkansas tonight was their homecoming game. I saw the ESPN broadcast was having a little fun with that, interviewing Arkansas fans and Arkansas students like, hey, why'd you make this your homecoming game? So that was funny. Brian Kelly threw a little jab there. But yeah, that was it. That was, the kinds of games where Brian Kelly can make those kinds of jokes instead of, slamming his fist on the table. LSU would always be happy to do
that. It's crazy how far things have come for LSU. You mentioned Wilson's tweet earlier that they've only led at halftime 3 games. I mean, they've freaking played Nicholls, UCLA, and South Alabama. That should be 3 right there. So how do you not, we're here in the 7th game of the year, and yet LSU has gone from Brian Kelly pounding his fist on the table post-game in Las Vegas, a loss that looks worse and worse all the time, by the way, because USC's now 3-4. They lost to Maryland today.
Yes.
I think they're 1-4 in the Big Ten. So that loss, you talk about college football playoff and big picture, that does not look good. But if you can go 11-1 and or make the SEC title game, then that doesn't matter. So, and so here LSU is, and it just seems like they get better and better every week, which has been Brian Kelly's MO at LSU. And now they're rolling into College Station. So let's see if we can bring on Koki Riley, who is with us. I'm going to take this off. Koki, working on deadline. I know you're joining us for just a few minutes. We appreciate that. So what were your thoughts on LSU's 34-10 victory over Arkansas?
I thought it was probably their most complete performance of the season so far, if you're considering the stakes and the circumstances and the fact that this could have very easily been a letdown game for them, just given the fact that you have the look ahead to a massive matchup in College Station, a potential top 10 matchup in College Station next weekend. And you also have, the emotional win coming last week against Ole Miss. So the fact that they were able to put together probably their best performance of the season in this sort of circumstance against a pretty solid team on the road, I mean, I gotta say, like, I didn't really see that coming. And I thought I was maybe even a little too optimistic by picking them to win by 7 points in this game, but I clearly underballed it because they won by 24. So, I mean, you have to be impressed by this performance from LSU. Again, they're getting better. Like you said, Zach, they're getting better every week.
Yeah. I was just looking something up. You're talking about the defense. And in the first half, Taylor Green hit Andrew Armstrong. He finished the game with 7 catches for 94 yards. If I'm counting this up correctly in my head, he had 6 catches for 90 yards at halftime, including his touchdown, which means he only caught 1 pass in the second half for 4 yards. So that's defensive adjustments. Reed and I have been talking about it. This defense, which was obviously the huge liability for the team last year, and was at times even early this season, especially with giving up big plays, you now are starting to look at it, kind of like with that side eye, like, hey, is this actually one of the team's strengths? I mean, this seems like a pretty well-rounded team right now.
Yeah, especially in the second half, I thought the front seven, and that includes Swinson and Savion Jones and Whit Weeks especially, they created HE double hockey sticks for Taylor Green in that offense.
We can say hell. Okay. Yeah, they made it a living hell for him. It's okay.
It was a living hell for.
It's like 10 o'clock at night, man.
Yeah.
The FCC rules don't apply.
I wasn't quite sure what I could say on here. It was a living hell for Arkansas's offensive line and for Taylor Green. And they just used Whit Weeks as a spy in a lot of these passing situations, and it worked. It was very reminiscent of the game 2 years ago in Fayetteville, where they just told Harold Perkins to spy the quarterback, and Harold Perkins just turned the game on top of its head, right? So I think this was just a very complete performance from the defense, especially in the second half. I mean, they only gave 3 points in the whole second half, right? And again, like they were disciplined, they tackled really well. Really the opposite of everything we saw last year, and it's all being generated from the front, I think. And I mean, obviously, I think the secondary is definitely playing better. I think Major Burns, especially, is playing better football right now. But it still all starts up front. At least that's my opinion.
All right. We are also getting better as the night goes along, just like LSU season, because I figured out how to get the graphics and our faces up here. So, I'm just trying to do my 1/3, guys. I'm just trying to do my 1/3. Koki, putting this in bigger context, and you mentioned the game in College Station next week. Georgia is now up 30-15 on Texas with 9:27 to play. Texas just got the ball back. It's not over, but if that result holds, then the game next week in College Station is the only 2 undefeated teams left in SEC play, which after week 1 would have seemed a completely crazy statement, but it's true. If we're 9 minutes and 27 seconds away from that being a first place showdown in the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, which is, again, that's an insane statement to make. But I think when you especially consider that LSU has done this while dominating Arkansas, while beating Ole Miss, while beating South Carolina on the road, and South Carolina had a nice performance this week against Oklahoma. Like, I think you have to feel pretty good about the situation if you're an LSU fan, especially if they somehow win this game. Not somehow, if they win next weekend, right? If they win next weekend, then I mean, there are some people you could argue that they're one of, if not the best team in the SEC. Like you could at least make the case that they're up there, right? I think right now they've sort of more firmly cemented their spot in the playoffs chase right now. But at the same time, like I say all these positive things, but one loss in College Station and another loss in Alabama, and all of a sudden your playoff hopes are over. So it can go away in a dash just like that. And a lot of that has to do with that USC game. So we just kind of have to take this 1 week at a time. We'll see. But at the same time, you have to be impressed by the way this team has played, the way this team played tonight, and how that and how that translates to the rest of the season.
And Koki, I don't take up too much of your time. I know you got more writing to do, but you've been high on A&M for quite some time, right? Like, what do you see from A&M, and how difficult of a matchup do you think that's going to be next week for LSU? A&M is probably going to be favored at home, right?
Yes. A&M also had trouble taking down Mississippi State this week. I mean, I think it was like a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. That was on the road, but still, that was a little bit surprising to see. Mississippi State is pretty easily the worst team in the conference. But at the same time, like, I think A&M's defense is excellent, and Connor Wegman's a pretty solid quarterback especially when he has time, and a talented guy. I think they run the ball really well. Like, that's going to be a challenge for LSU in this game, trying to consistently stop that run, which is kind of wore down opponents a lot. Their offense isn't quite as explosive as an Ole Miss or even in Arkansas at times. So I think LSU's defense, as long as they can sort of hold up against Texas A&M's sort of downhill rushing attack, I think they can sort of hang in there in this game. But it's going to be a big key for the offense to keep the sticks moving, to stay on the field, because this Texas A&M defense it's excellent. It's right up there with Ole Miss. It's right up there with Tennessee. I think it's one of the better units in the country, and they're going to have their hands full next week against them. But I mean, we got a whole week to talk about that matchup, so I don't want to take up too much, I guess, helium on that.
Yeah, we'll be talking plenty about that one. Were you at any point tonight, Koki, and we'll end with this one? LSU in the first half finally got off to a good start. Really, outside of South Alabama, the first time they've done that. So the first time they've done that in a big game this year. Got off to a good start, but they were settling for field goals. They settled for 3 field goals in the first half. They settled for another one in the second half when they, that one I won't say settled for because it gave them a 3-score lead. But they did end up kicking 4 field goals. At any point in the first half, were you worried that they were going to let Arkansas hang around and let that home crowd stay in it and make things funny at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything up until the Whit Weeks interception, sack interception, I guess. I don't know how you strip interception. Everything up until that, the game was very much in the balance. And a lot of it had to do with some of the miscues that LSU was making on the offensive line that sort of stalled these drives, despite the fact that the running game was playing pretty well, especially in the first half. And, they could more or less get what they want in the passing game. I thought Arkansas did a good job of shutting off the deeper passing game, all those deep crossers that LSU's really been feasting on for much of the season. They did a good job of shutting that down. And that's why Nussmeier was really efficient on short passes, but was very not inefficient on plays downfield.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. English. On those passing plays downfield. So I think that they still have to sort of find this balance between the explosives and just trying to find that efficient style of offense that you need to have. Like, I think the fourth quarter drive that they had to sort of salt away the game, like, that was huge for them in terms of that, just showing that they can put together a 14-play 80-yard drive that lasts over 8 minutes. And yeah, again, like, the efficiency on offense is kind of the key for this team. And like, if a team like Arkansas is going to take away your right hand, can you play with your left? And there were moments in this game where they could do that, and there were also moments in this game where they couldn't do that. And that's something that's probably like a smaller critique than just the running game, but it's something to sort of keep an eye out for as we move along this season.
All right, he's Koki Riley. We appreciate you taking a few minutes off your deadline writing to join us. We'll let you get back to it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Koki. And back with Reed Darcey. And Reed, maybe we'll wrap up. We'll have 5-10 more minutes here and then let people go watch the end of the Georgia-Texas game. Texas is trying to make it a one-possession game again with about a little less than 7 minutes left. So it's still a ball game. Elsewhere around the SEC, let's take a look at some quick scores. Because this is obviously the big one, but it was a big day in the conference, period. And it kind of shaped a lot of stuff. Tennessee beats Alabama 24-17, a comeback victory. They were shut out in the first half, come back and really put the Crimson Tide on the ropes for the college football playoff. Alabama's now 5-2, and their next 2 games, we know they play LSU at Tiger Stadium in 3 weeks. They have a bye before that. First, they play Missouri at home. One more loss and Alabama's out of this thing. They got the Iron Bowl with Auburn still to come too. Even if you're Alabama and you have that great win over Georgia, which is the best win anybody has, I guess you could say Oregon over Ohio State, but one of the best wins anybody has in the country this year. 9-3 probably doesn't get it done, assuming what's going on elsewhere around the conference and the country. So Alabama is, the margin for error is gone.
Are we sure 10-2 would get it done? Because if you look at the last 3 weeks for Alabama, they lost to Vanderbilt, right? And then they barely beat South Carolina. They sort of escaped that game late after South Carolina. They recover an onside kick, and then they nearly come back and then steal that game. And now you lose to Tennessee on the road. Tennessee's a really good team, but their offense has really been struggling the last few weeks, and Alabama couldn't beat them. They couldn't match up with them. Tennessee, it's always a tough place to play. So I don't think you can look at Alabama and say that it's hugely disappointing that they lost that game. They could have, that game could have easily gone either way. I think Alabama played, they played well at times, but if you look back at this season, you really got to look at that Vanderbilt loss, because that's really what might hold them back from competing for a playoff spot. They've got the best win in the conference so far. They beat Georgia, assuming what happens here with Georgia and Texas, that might change, but they've also got the worst loss, and that's the Vanderbilt, right? And that can't happen if you're Alabama, and that's what might ultimately be preventing them from competing for a playoff down the stretch, because you beat LSU, you beat Auburn, coming up next, then you're gonna have a case, but it's ultimately probably going to be out of your hands.
Yeah, you're right. The win over Georgia is somewhat tempered by a bad loss to Vanderbilt. At least we think it's a bad loss. Vanderbilt might end up going 8-4 or something, and maybe it doesn't look that bad. But it's interesting. LSU fans will roll their eyes at this, but I know you're thinking the same thing. If Alabama's 10-2, they're probably getting in just because name brand, and we know how committees work and everything. And I would expect them to be very deep in that conversation if they're 10-2. But elsewhere around the conference, as mentioned, Georgia is up 30-15 on Texas, and Texas is driving. They just got a targeting penalty, so they're inside the 30 and trying to make that a one-score game again. Koki mentioned this one. Texas A&M just kind of hangs on against Mississippi State, kept them at arm's length. 34-24 was the final there. Missouri beats Auburn 21-17. They were down 17-6 entering the fourth quarter and came back. Auburn, another close loss. They're now 2-5. Vanderbilt beats Ball State 24-14. Kind of sleptwalked their way through that one, it looks like. And then the other one I really wanted to circle, Reed, South Carolina 35, Oklahoma 9 in Norman. So shocking result. And you can look at it one of two ways. And I think the way most people are looking at it as Oklahoma is a dead team. Look at the schedule. They're going to go be lucky to be 6-6 in a bowl game. Go look at their schedule. They have a horrifically tough schedule to finish outside of, I think they play, is it Maine? They play in one game. That's probably their 5th win. But outside of that, their schedule is brutal. And they have 4 wins right now. They may only finish with 5 the way they're playing. The other way to look at this is South Carolina, which almost won in Tuscaloosa last week, and almost beat LSU in Columbia last month. That's a pretty damn good team.
Yeah, South Carolina they played LSU down to the wire. They played Alabama down to the wire, and now they've absolutely throttled Oklahoma, right? We know Oklahoma's offense isn't very good. I didn't think it was this bad. I didn't think these problems were that bad. But you got to mention, South Carolina's defense is really good. It's one of the best defenses in the country. It's up there in the SEC with A&M and Ole Miss and then Tennessee. It's a legit good team. And if they had won one of those games against LSU and Alabama, which they easily could have, I think people would be talking about them a little more seriously than they are. They lost to Kentucky. That was a bad loss for them. But ever since then, they've played really good football. And I think if they had gotten some more consistent play out of their quarterback, and maybe if Lenore Sellers hadn't gotten hurt, And in the second half against LSU, maybe their season is completely different. And then we're looking at them a completely different way. So super impressed with them. That was a huge win by them.
Yeah, just for the record, they did beat Kentucky. Their losses are to LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama. So,
right.
Yeah, they did. They beat Kentucky. They struggled with Old Dominion in their opener. I think people were kind of down on them, and they beat Kentucky, took LSU to the wire. Probably should have won that game if we're being honest, and then probably should have won in Tuscaloosa too. So this is a team that easily could be like 6-1 in the top 10 if things had gone a little bit differently. Now, when you play a lot of close games, you're going to lose some as well. But that's how it goes. The one other SEC score that's still live, Florida is beating Kentucky 48-20. So Florida with DJ Lagway at quarterback showing out on offense against Kentucky. And, Florida's not going anywhere as far as the college football playoff or anything like that. But this is a team that has a bye week. Then they play Georgia, Texas, LSU. So it gets tough for them fast. But they don't look like they're just a walkover team either.
Yeah, and that Kentucky defense is good. I mixed up that result with South Carolina, Kentucky. I got it jumbled. I remember writing about that one against Kentucky.
Either team they're similar teams in some ways.
Yeah, they are. They are. I remember writing about that one in the context of Ole Miss, I think, because or was it Georgia? Probably. I don't remember. But yeah, Florida. Graham Mertz, their quarterback, is out for the year, but they got DJ Lagway, a 5-star freshman, right behind him. This is pretty impressive what you need to see from them against that Kentucky defense, which is really good. But they're probably going 0-3 these next 3 weeks.
Yeah, their schedule was just so difficult to begin with that, and I left this off. They played Georgia, Texas, LSU, and then Ole Miss. So
0-4, maybe 1-3.
Yeah, I mean. They're going to go 4-3 after tonight, and they end with Florida State, who looks like a lost season. So maybe that's win number 5. But to make a bowl game and possibly save Billy Napier's job, got to win one of those 4. I think Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss. Win one of them, go 6-6. Maybe Billy Napier sticks around, and LSU just hopes it's not them.
The thing with Florida is, I mean, their SEC schedule shook out to where it was absolutely brutal, but they also had games against Miami and Florida State scheduled on top of that. Think about that. That's what those 2 games that made their schedule, as difficult as we thought it would be. Obviously, Florida State isn't what we thought it would be, but those 2 games are tough for Florida.
Also, Florida should have beat Tennessee, or should have. I'll say this: they should have gone for 2 when they scored late in that game and given themselves a chance to win in Tennessee. You're the underdog. Go for it. All right. Texas is going to lose to Georgia. It looks like Georgia has the ball back. Just got a first down. About 3 minutes left, up 30-15. So barring some sort of miracle, it's going to be 2 undefeated teams, the only 2 undefeated teams in the SEC, meeting next Saturday in College Station. So we're going to leave it there. And you can read all of our LSU coverage from Fayetteville tonight from Wilson Alexander and Scott Rabelais. They're live on location. That's at theadvocate.com/LSU. And we will have LSU Sports Insider podcast for you Monday, wrapping this one up further. And then Thursday, looking ahead to the big showdown, LSU versus Texas A&M. Any final thoughts on the night, Reed?
I mean, that's really all about it. I mean, it's going to be a huge game in College Station next week. Really, LSU doesn't really play a not huge game the rest of the way. I think all these are going to be huge. All these are against SEC teams, and they're all going to have huge consequences. And that's what's so great about college football. I think people have kind of had some worries about whether the expanded playoff was going to devalue some of these regular season games. That has not been the case at all. Every game, it feels like life and death at this point, even though your hopes aren't technically gone after losing one of these games. It's still incredibly high stakes, so I can't wait for it. Looking forward to it. It's going to be super fun. Yeah,
doesn't feel like anything's devalued at all, does it? And,
no.
They always say if you win in October, you get to play games that people remember in November. And LSU's taking care of business in October. They got one more game left. And if they can win that, then they could set themselves up for a very special season. So LSU beats Arkansas 34-10. This has been the LSU Sports Insider postgame show brought to you by Waste Pro. He's Reed Darcey. I'm Zach Ewing. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you Monday for the LSU Sports Insider podcast.